All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to what I will dub a special episode of Ninja Stars Not Included. I am your host, Alex, aka Corrupt Ronin, or Ronin for short, as many of you know. And joining me today is a very special guest, the star of the Devil May Cry franchise, so to speak, Ruben Langdon. Thank you so much for joining me today, sir. How you doing?
Very good, very good. Wonderful Monday morning here, so
Yeah, and I do
thanks for having
apologize.
me.
Do apologize for the whole getting the process set up and the delay and getting contact with you and stuff like that because things got
All
kind
right.
of busy and it was kind of
Well,
annoying.
I've been busy myself, and for you to do sort of adjust and do this interview on a Monday morning of all times, it's the only time I had, so appreciate it.
No, no problem, no problem. So with that said, I'm gonna go ahead and hop into a lot of the questions that we have here for this interview that I've lined up.
Sure.
And for those that may not know exactly, who you are and what you do exactly, could you fill in the viewers here a little bit about, exactly who is Ruben Langdon?
Whew. Yeah, I haven't been asked that in a bit. So, who is Ruben Langdon? Well, I guess we're all defined by what we do, right? That's sort of the defining mark of how we define ourselves in a way. So I've been pretty lucky over the course of my life and career, the past 20 years, to be a part of some amazing projects,
Mm.
and I know that's what we're mostly going to be talking about here. So started off working in Japan, and then I lived in Hong Kong for about a year,
Yeah.
and got to work with some of the greatest martial art film guys in the world, Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung. I didn't work with Donnie Yen, but I got to meet him and hang out with him for a little bit. And Hong Kong's a pretty small little community, so
Really?
you make friends, and if you're looking to get into the industry and you're there for a little bit, you get around pretty quick. So yeah, then after that, I went back to Japan for a bit, had a little motorcycle accident that sucked.
Oh, jeez.
uh, then after a couple of surgeries, then went to the States and started working on Power Rangers, and
Nice.
came back to the States, so to say. So worked on Power Rangers for a bit, went back to Hong Kong a couple years later, and then worked on with Jackie and Sammo Hung on the movie The Medallion.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um, Horrible movie, but for me, it was an amazing experience
yeah.
because I got to work with one of my childhood heroes, Jackie Chan, and Sammo Hung, and then I just came back to the States after that. That was a bit, and then I just continued to work in TV and film. Started working in video games and worked on Devil May Cry and
Yeah.
several other Capcom titles. And then let's see, got the wonderful opportunity, the call to go work on a little tiny film called Avatar,
Yep.
and
A very small film.
very small film. And that went for about 4 years. And at the same time, I was running my company at the time, Just Cause Productions, and was producing Resident Evil 5,
Yeah.
all the cutscenes, producing and acting in the cutscenes for that. And later, the company grew. We got to do Resident Evil 6 and
Yeah.
all the cutscenes, and reprised the role of Chris Redfield in that. And working on various TV shows in Hollywood, The Office, Dexter. Um,
Oh yeah.
so going, I don't know, I have to go even look at my IMDb to just remember the stuff. But just working in Hollywood as both a stunt coordinator and performer, actor, stuntman,
Mm.
all kinds of various projects. And here we are. We are now to what, 2016,
Oh
and
yeah.
now I'm been over the past couple of years been focusing a lot of my attention on documentary filmmaking
Yes.
and seeking the truth about various sort of out there subjects and trying to find out what's really going on with our virtual reality holographic universal world here. And so at the same time, still sort of paying the bills. And 'cause unfortunately, documentary filmmaking is, unless you're Michael Moore, is not the most lucrative business to be in.
Right.
Most documentaries don't make any money.
Oh.
Most of the people actually lose money on them,
Oh wow.
unless you have one of those one-hit wonders, or like Michael Moore, several hit wonders. So, but it's a passion, and I'm pursuing that while working on various films. I'm working on a Chinese film right now, and I can't go into too much detail
Oh.
because of NDAs and stuff.
Yeah, it's fine.
Uh, but yeah, it's interesting. I'm not in China yet, but I'm working on a Chinese film in the States. That's all I can say. So here we are. Yeah,
Yeah.
2016 Chinese films, documentaries, and it's a Monday, and I'm talking to you. And that's who I am, I
That's how it
guess.
all
I don't
wraps
know.
around, huh? I said, are you,
Well, and that's career wise, and I know that's let me just this. I actually don't think our careers define who we are.
mhm,
I know that your audience is sort of expecting to what who am I, and they're sort of looking at my career and that kind of stuff. But
right.
just to sort of maybe rephrase the question, the answer to the question.
Sure.
At the end of the day, if we were really going to who I am, that's a whole nother topic subject matter. And I don't know if your audience would even be keen to listen to that spiel for a while. But so I gave the answer based on what I think the question is pertaining to, which is career wise, and
Oh no, that's
there it
totally
is.
fine. I feel like you've answered that to the best possible way that you could, and I think it's fantastic for what you explained so far. I was kind of curious though, are you in the States right now, or are you
I'm in
somewhere?
the States, yeah.
Okay,
I'm in LA, but it's yeah, not at my house.
okay,
As I mentioned, Airbnb, the production is paying for stuff, so
yeah.
I'm
So
taking advantage of that right now.
that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So you, like you said, you couldn't say anything about the film that you're working on currently due to NDAs and stuff like that, but that's totally
Yeah,
fine. But I'm
yeah.
pretty excited to
Unfortunately,
see it though.
it's actually it's not a big deal. It's just a lot of film productions, video games, sometimes they like to make it a bigger deal than it really is, and they make you sign your life away, and maybe it will become a big deal. I don't know, but a lot of these NDAs and people they get carried away with stuff so much, and especially in the video game industry, it's really wow. The game industry is so protective of their IPs,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
and and I get it. I totally get it, but there's a point where it gets to just be ridiculous,
Mm.
where if you're not divulging specific secrets about the game or spoilers or that kind of thing, big deal. Let people talk about it. It's promoting your project. But the fact that you can't talk about it, for example, little rant here
Yeah. No,
on
feel free.
Street Fighter. Street Fighter 5, and I love the Capcom guys and they're awesome. But the fact that even the trailer came out, it's clearly my voice. I clearly did Street Fighter prior, Street Fighter 4 and all the Super Street Fighter and all those others.
Yeah, yeah.
Clearly, it's my voice. I'm in the credits. The trailer comes out, or they release the Ken trailer, right?
Hmm.
Whoa, that sounds exactly like Ruben Langdon.
Yeah,
I
it
wonder
did.
if it's Ruben Langdon. Well, wait a minute. Ruben Langdon did he did part four. That if we put them side by side, it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably Ruben Langdon. Oh, but if let's ask Ruben Langdon. I'm sorry, I signed an NDA. I can't say that. It's
Yeah.
me. Uh, you can't even say that it's me. I understand if I'm giving away plot points and that kind of stuff, but to say that I can't even say that it's me,
When it's clearly
that
you. Yeah.
it's really me. And
Yeah.
this is the constant video game ridiculousness. Um, and other things. A friend of mine is somehow she messed up. She put a title on her resume, and then the media grabbed a hold of it. And the media,
Oh.
it's also the media's fault for it, also for just like making a bigger deal about.
Yeah.
And just because it was on her resume and it was a typo, and
Oh.
and I think she meant she put like part three instead of part two or
Hmm.
whatever it was. I forget what it was. So the media grabbed it. IGN was like, "Oh, so and so had on their resume
Oh
part three. That means there's
yeah.
going to be a part three," and then blew the whole thing up. And all these, she can no longer work in the video
Oh, that's
game business
insane. That is
because
insane.
everybody said that she's and there was because actually, as a matter of fact, they actually did have a part three in development,
Hmm.
or maybe I don't know, maybe they I don't even know if that. Good thing I didn't say the title because I don't even know if that's like top secret or whatever. Still, I might
Right.
lose my job, my working ability in the industry. But
Oh
anyways,
no.
it was just so everybody, and it wasn't. She was working for a third party. That third party was going to get sued because they
Jeez.
hired her, and then the video company was like, "You can't do this," and then she had to apologize. All these apologies, court cases thrown around, ridiculous because of a typo.
Oh my God. Yeah, that is
You know,
insane.
it's it's uh it's uh it's just really anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry to go off on that little tangent rant,
No, it's totally
but
fine.
some of these NDAs and going on going crazy on these game companies just like ruthless
Yeah.
about don't you and it's like hey guys it's okay if it's promoting your product and
Exactly.
don't
Exactly.
just everybody's very
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because a while ago I did an interview with Quentin Flynn, who is the voice of Raiden in Metal Gear Solid, and he pretty much said the same thing that you did. Like it's kind of ridiculous for these NDAs when people can hear the voices of these characters and they clearly know who it is,
yeah
regardless of whether or not you said that. And yeah, he's pretty much in the same boat you are about that kind of stuff. You want to promote the game, but you also want to promote stuff like that too. So yeah, it's
yeah it's
totally understand that.
yeah I understand it's respecting the IP and not wanting to damage it and that kind of thing. And I think as long as the actors are um and things there's also special release dates and these kinds of things that you
Right.
do want to respect and not say anything. But one in the case of the trailer's clearly out and then people are saying, "Hey, is this you?" And I'm like, could be. I don't know,
Like
maybe.
maybe it is, maybe it's not.
So
Who knows?
and you're just putting the actor in a really awkward position
Yeah, yeah,
of like uh you know it, almost yeah it's just ridiculous and
yeah.
it's like what we're not gonna ruin your IP, we're gonna help promote it.
Right, exactly,
So
exactly.
anyways,
Yeah.
that's my long spent rant on NDAs and stuff.
No, it's totally fine. For this show, I'm usually laid back, and for the codec and stuff like that, we're all pretty laid back for stuff like this. So you can say whatever you want to say here, and it's totally fine. So, but moving on from that, we talked a little bit about video games, but I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the work you've done in Japan on shows like Beat Fighter Kabuto, for example. You were the character Mac Wendy, I believe it was, in that show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
McDonald's and Wendy's, the perfect American fast food mania.
So I was kind of curious about, how that came about and, what that experience was like for you working in Japan and stuff like that.
Yeah, uh that was really the beginning of my career. That was I moved to Japan sort of just on a whim, not on a whim, I should say. It was calculated. But wanting to just go there to go there. I didn't really have a specific purpose in mind. Like I'm going to go to Japan and be an actor. Like
Mm.
that was the furthest thing from being an actor was the furthest thing from my life goals at that time. Um, I just wanted to go to Japan to be in Japan because I thought Japan was cool.
Yeah.
And I was, I loved manga and anime and, and samurais and, ninjas and everything else that Japan has to offer, the
Awesome.
culture, technology, and, small pocket sized, super camcorders, whatever it was.
A man after my own heart because I love those things too.
Yeah, and so I just bought a ticket and I went and I got there, fell in love with the place, never wanted to leave. And sort of out of a means of survival, I signed up with some modeling agencies,
Mm.
freelance modeling agencies, and started getting calls to go do auditions and uh, got some modeling gigs under my belt. And that was sort of help pay the bills while I was there.
Mm.
And then as I started doing that more, I was like, oh, this whole modeling thing's interesting, but it's kind of, what about acting? And some commercial spots came up, and I always found those more interesting to
Yeah.
be in front of a live action camera instead of a still camera. And then kind of going through that, I started doing a little bit of acting. I started training as an actor in Japan.
Mm.
Um,
Uh,
going to acting classes
Hmm.
in Japan in Japanese. So that was interesting, and that was also sort of a language study for me as well because I'd get my scripts for the board, have to learn my lines, and then perform the class and act in Japanese, which I think really helped my Japanese language ability because you have to know what you're saying, you have to put emotion into what you're saying,
Hmm.
and then you really get a good grasp of the emotional content behind the words to put it all into, I don't know, especially when I wasn't fluent. Anyways, it really, I think, boosted my studying. So if anybody wants to study Japanese, go sign up for some Japanese acting classes. It's probably the quickest way to do it. Um, so then shortly after I started setting my goals into that direction, the audition for B Fighter Kabuto came up, and I went to it and got it. A couple callbacks, and I got it, and I was like, super cool. Wow, I'm doing this. I was a fan of the Sentai stuff already.
Yeah.
I think I was the only guy at the audition that knew a henshin pose, a transformation. I think I did the old Kamen Rider pose at the
Oh
audition,
yeah, that's awesome.
and I remember the guys' eyes widened up, like, wow, this guy knows about Sentai stuff. And I was like, all the other guys were just like models, right? So they were just not really
Not really
into.
into it.
They
Yeah.
weren't as nerdy as I was. I was like super into the nerd stuff. Um, which now nerd is mainstream, but back then, it was
Yeah.
kind of off. Uh, and then got the job, and I remember my first day on the job. It was my 21st birthday,
Mhm.
and I got to transform. I got to do some like action run and fly through the air and punch some, big suit monsters in their face, and got thrown around, and then had to say my dialogue, and I remember driving home on the bus that day. It's like, this is it. I've done it. I'm exactly where I want to be, and this is where I'm going to be the rest of my life. And to some extent, phasing from direction to direction, but essentially, I've been doing that. I've been doing the same thing for 20 years, doing, if not exactly the same thing, obviously Power Rangers, but I've been beating up the bad guys and usually wearing some sort of spandex, and whether it's in a motion capture suit or on a superhero TV show. Uh, you, yeah, so it's been a lot of fun, and yeah, I have no regrets. Super awesome. Super
That's
grateful for all the experiences I've had that have gotten me to where I am now. And B Fighter was huge.
that sounds fantastic. Fantastic. And for those who don't know, B Fighter Kabuto was actually appealed to the American crowd on top of that, and it was brought over to the states in a different form, which it was called Beetleborgs at the time.
Yeah, I,
Yeah.
I have yet to see an episode, but from what I've heard, don't we?
I mean, for me as a kid, when I watched it, I loved it. But looking back on it, I was kind of like, "Oh, really? This is I liked this. This was what I was into, huh?" So yeah, this is it's a thing that you should probably go check out for the sake of knowing what it is at least, and go probably check out some
Sure.
videos on YouTube for B Fighter Kabuto as well to see Ruben in one of his greatest
Yeah.
moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, there's a great set of interviews specifically pertaining about B Fighter. It's on my website. If you go to the news section,
Hmm.
they just came out a few months back. So if people want to know more detail about it's my experiences in specifically with B Fighter, it's called the Gaijin Memories.
Oh yeah, yes, I watched that.
You saw that? Okay,
Yeah, that's pretty good.
it's good stuff.
Yeah. So you mentioned Power Rangers on top of that. Do you recall which series of Power Rangers you worked on specifically, or was it
Yeah, I
was it another one?
started. I worked on several. I started. I think I worked on the last episode of Lost Galaxy.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
and then off and on throughout Lightspeed Rescue,
Hmm.
and then I was there pretty much for every episode for Time Force.
Oh
I
wow.
think that was the season that I was contracted full time, and I worked I worked before, in the pre-production, training the actors, all the way to, yeah, I think every episode to the finale and everything. Um, and then I went back on a sort of a part-time contract for Wild Force, so it's
Oh,
kind of off and on
jeez.
Wild Force, and then they took the show to New Zealand. So I had, hey, that's that's when I had to say goodbye to Power Rangers.
Yeah, the traveling and stuff like that, the different scenes and settings and stuff like that they're pretty unique in some sense, and they do go to a lot of different locations for those series. But I think it's really cool that you actually had a chance to sit down and work on all of those. Now, was it just
Yeah,
like pre-production stuff like that? Was it also like stunts and things like that on top of that for Power
yeah,
Rangers?
yeah. I was in the suits every day. When you're part of the stunt, I was part of the stunt team.
Hmm.
So when you're part of the stunt team, every day is a different adventure. You sort of put the suit on. You go into your trailer in the morning, and whatever suits in your trailer and whatever sides are on the table there, that's who you are. That's what you're going to do that day. So you know, Koichi and Makoto, Koichi Sakamoto and Yokoyama Makoto were sort of the two main action directors, and they would swap off second unit stuff depending on the episode. So whatever they wanted us to be that day, that's what we were. And then we would always switch up, and sometimes we'd be two or three different characters a day,
Oh
having
wow.
different changes throughout the day, different scenes. So all of it from, random pedestrian getting knocked over by monsters as they're running through the street, or to the monsters knocking over the other pedestrians in the street, to even wearing, even sometimes Red Ranger or Blue Ranger after they transform, into their things, and then doing whatever task it is. So we had a team of about 10 guys, maybe 10, 15 guys, depends. And the bigger episodes, reunion episodes, we'd call in a bunch more guys. But uh, as being a regular stunt team, we had several duties from not only just performing, but also rigging and wire work and helping, behind the camera, just make everything go as smooth as possible
Right,
to
right.
get the shots. Because they would crank it out. We had like 50 shots a day to get every
Oh
day,
jeez.
50 to 60, sometimes more 80, sometimes,
Oof.
depending on how big the scene was. We moved
Jesus.
fast. It was very fast paced. Rarely do we have any really downtime breaks. They crammed a lot in
Yeah.
every day of work.
Oh
It
wow.
was fun. It really prepped me for what I'm doing now, and can learn how to work under pressure, and physically, how to fall without any pads.
Yeah.
Because some of those Power Ranger suits, the monsters are already sort of padded because
Right.
they're like these big, padded creatures. But when you're when you're an actual ranger, there's little room to put pads,
Oh wow.
and if any, because they all show, it's all sort of
Oh
skin tight
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So, so you gotta have to learn how to flip and fall and do all your stuff without getting hurt. And after landing on your tailbone two or three times, you sort of learn how
Ooh.
to not land on your
Jeez.
tailbone
Oh my God.
because it's like sore from you landing on it the day before. And so it teaches you how to be a better stunt man for sure.
Oh geez. So
That experience.
you've never had any like serious injuries on the set because of that as you learned to do that, or was it just a
Most of my serious injuries have come offset. This is and it's so stupid because then you can't work,
Yeah. Yeah.
for till your injuries are healed. So, but that's the way it is. When you're on set, I think, for me anyways, I'm more focused and sort of aware, and we practice all the time and to do specific moves. So you're sort of hyper focused now on your moves, where the accidents happen, when you're just riding your bike down the street, or when you're,
Jeez.
in training and you're just doing something you've done a million times and you're
Yeah.
just not focused, and then something happens. So I think the goal is to have that focus 24/7
Oh man.
and in everything you do, and then you don't get injuries. But that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, like for me, I've always wondered what it was kind of like to actually be able to take hits like that on the set and not get injured on top of that. Like for me, I tend to get into things like parkour and stuff like that, and they kind of go over things about how to dive and roll without taking any injuries and stuff like that, which I thought was actually really cool. But so for my next
Yeah.
question, amazingly enough, the first time I heard about you was during the credits of Devil May Cry 3, of course. And
Mhm.
during those credits, it said that you were also part of a studio called Just Cause, I believe it was called.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I started Just Cause with my partner back in 2001.
Mhm.
Um, since a couple years later, I actually am no longer with the company. I left it with my partners to pursue my documentary filmmaking and just performing stuff, where the responsibilities there were sort of taking me in a different direction that was awesome, and got to work on a lot of cool projects, but just decided to go a different route with my life, my
Yeah.
career,
Yeah.
and still great friend. I just talked to my ex partner yesterday on the phone, so we're still in good terms, good communications and stuff. But but yeah, I'm sort of done that and now ready for a new chapter.
No, that
But
sounds
yeah,
good.
Just Cause was a full on production company
Hmm.
that we started, and we started moving into the motion capture video game, mostly video games, I guess, but we did motion capture for films and everything. So I actually had a full motion capture studio doing a lot of work for games, all kinds of games, everything you can think of, really. Which my mind is blanking on all of the games we've done. But,
like I've seen games like Tomb Raider, for example, something along the lines of Uncharted might have something to do with that too.
yeah,
Resident Evil.
those were not done. They weren't Uncharted, Tomb Raider were not done at my studio per
Hmm.
se,
Hmm.
but um, but uh, but I worked on those. So I've worked on several games
Yeah.
outside of my company. So
Yeah.
my company just was doing a lot of stuff from Japan. I think we worked on the Ninja Gaiden series. We
Oh
worked
wow.
on um, I'm trying to think of the U.S. stuff. Man, mine's blanking. I don't
It's
know.
all right.
I'm sure if you Google the company's still there. So if you Google Just Cause and you look at the latest reels, or there's probably a ton of stuff on
Yeah.
there. So
So yeah, so it wasn't just related to just Capcom games and stuff like that. It was all sorts of games and stuff like that from Japan.
yeah. So my career, the company was one thing, and sort of simultaneously, I was working on other projects, Avatar, other game projects. I'd get called. I've been doing mocap for a long time. I
Yeah.
think I feel I'm probably been doing it longer than anybody on this planet.
Oh jeez.
Um, as far as having a healthy career, I'm sure people have been doing it longer,
Hmm.
but a guy who's still doing it,
Yeah.
um, because I started in 1997
Oh
was
wow.
my first mocap gig.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was Chris Redfield in Code Veronica.
Oh wow. Yeah. That's wow. That was a ways back.
So I mean, I'm sure that there's other actors there might still be doing it,
Mm.
but to be like doing it as much as I do it, it's still sort of my main gig, bread and butter, is motion capture.
Right.
So I don't know if if anybody could say that they've been doing mocap for 20 years and as their main bread and butter thing.
Right. Right.
So even though, I'm still working on other films and doing other stuff, but I sort of am like, that's my thing. It's motion capture.
No, that's totally fine. I think that's really cool for the fact that you've been doing this for so long and that you enjoyed what you were doing up to that point. And a lot of that led up into getting into things like Devil May Cry, for example,
Yeah,
and being really well known for that. On top of that, it's not every day you hear about voice actors who also do the motion capture for their characters at the same time. At least during that time, it wasn't as big of a thing as it is now. So I thought that was really cool and stuff like that to be able to see you do things like that and
right.
have that legacy behind you going forward. So while we're on the topic of video games, talking about Devil May Cry 3 and 4, can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up getting into the role of Dante for Devil May Cry?
You mean just as a as an actor character choice, or more of like how did I get the job?
Yeah, like was it an audition or things like that, or did
Oh,
Capcom approach you for it? Yeah.
Yeah, so you just mentioned Just Cause. So at the time, my partner and I were sort of pitching to Capcom, Konami, and other game companies in Japan
Mhm.
to do the motion capture for these characters that would ultimately, or I should say, these games that would ultimately be released in English,
Yeah.
mostly just English. A lot of games coming out of Japan at the time, and still today, their cutscenes or their final product would only have an English dialogue, an
Mhm.
English track. And what they were doing, and still again today, they do this for budgetary reasons. They hire Japanese actors uh, uh, to perform the motion capture,
Right.
and then they'll hire U.S. based or Canadian based voice actors
Mhm.
to do the VO over that. And because of my experience on Code Veronica, because that's sort of what was happening in Code Veronica, I
Mhm.
worked on that. I was the only native English speaker on that project. Everybody else was speaking Japanese, even though the final product was going to be in
In
English.
English. Yeah.
So I sort of saw, I guess, an opportunity. I saw, hey, this something's not right here, and then years later, I formed the company with my partner Shibata, and we sort of went around to different game studios and pitched to them and say, hey, we can help fix this problem you guys have.
Yeah.
We can cast actors. By this time, I had the experience of working on Power Rangers. We can hire actors, actors that are used to the physical demands that motion capture has, and some of these scripts are very physically demanding.
Yeah.
So we can hire seasoned actors from the States to come out, do the motion capture, and then do the voice,
Mhm.
full performance. We were actually pitching full performance capture back in 2000, 2001.
Oh
This
wow.
was, which is now sort of the mainstream, what everybody's trying to do now,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
get the full performance stuff. Um, so we went around to the different video game companies, Namco, Konami, as I mentioned, uh, Capcom. But Capcom was really the one that sort of said, "Hey, we like that. That's an idea. That's a good idea. So let's give you guys a shot." So they gave us reshoots for Resident Evil Outbreak. Uh,
Oh yeah.
they had some dialogue stuff, and we're like, okay. So we held it in audition in L.A. I was living in L.A. at the time. Uh, just finished my run on Power Rangers. They moved the show to New Zealand, and so I held an audition, got some folks together, and we flew them out to Japan, did the motion capture.
Mhm.
The voices were sort of already determined
Yeah.
by Canadian directors. So, but what Capcom noticed was, yeah, if we use these American actors, everything feels better.
Yeah.
The motion matches with the dialogue, as opposed to this sort of mixed match. I call it a bad kung fu movie effect, where because clearly the Chinese speakers of the kung fu movies are speaking Chinese, but then
Right.
we have English dialogue, which is usually poorly written, and then the lips don't match.
Right.
In this case, you can animate the lips to match, but you can't match the body movements.
Right.
The body movements of, and it's just, and this is nothing against Japanese performers. The performances are excellent and they're amazing. It's just during certain words, like right now, I'm using my hands and gestures
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
help, push and what's the word I'm looking for? Accentuate
Yeah.
certain words, and I use my body movement to do that. And we do that when we act. It's like depending on the dialogue or whatever it is, we're constantly adding motion to our words. And and Japanese people do that with their words. So when they're adding certain motions to their words, and just doesn't match when it's not sunk up right with your
Right.
dialogue. So that was
Right.
sort of the big pitch. It worked. Capcom loved it. As we were finishing, sort of winding down production on Outbreak, they came to us and said, "Hey, we've got another project sort of in the works. It's called Devil May Cry. We'd love to um, have you on board and see if you guys can do your casting magic." and they're like, oh, hey, by the way, Ruben, you kind of look like that guy Dante. Could you audition for him? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'd love to audition for him. So went back to the States, did the same thing. Got a bunch of Power Rangers to audition for all the different characters, including Dante. Had several people come in and read for Dante, and then I put myself also on camera for that. And Capcom ended up picking me, and I was like super stoked. I was like, awesome. And then later we did the motion capture. So it was sort of we were auditioning for voice and motion on the first audition, but Capcom was 100% convinced after we did the mocap. They
Right.
said we want to do another audition for voices. Even though I was trying to sort of push the full performance, they weren't 100% sure. So
Yeah.
we did a whole nother audition run for the voices after the motion capture,
Mhm.
and they still ended up picking me again, which was again I was super stoked
Yeah.
because and they ended up sticking with Dan Southworth as Virgil. They stuck with his voice, and who else was in that at the time? There was a couple other characters that ended up sticking with their voice as well.
Mhm.
So Jester and it's Arkham, right? So they stuck with Adam Clark. They kept his voice for those.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's it. That was how it started, and
Mhm.
then Devil May Cry 4 came along, and I had to audition again for
Yeah.
Dante. Capcom was like, hey, he's a much older character now. Even though you're old, we don't think you can play old. You played young before. I'm like, okay, because at first they were like, you're too old, you can't play young. So so I played young Dante, and then now they're like, well, you're old, and sort of Dante is the image of the age you are, but we don't think you can do it. So please audition again. So I auditioned again.
Jeez.
And then voice auditions came around again, and I had to do that again. And
Yeah.
so,
Oh, that's
anyways, it was, but it was cool, and it's been a great experience, and it's one of my favorite characters to portray, and I've had a great time doing
yeah.
that.
I think it definitely shows in the performance of Dante in both the third and fourth games. On top of that, and I was kind of curious though because you mentioned that they said you kind of have a little bit of the lightness to Dante as well. Was there any facial capture stuff when you were working on these games at all?
For Devil May Cry 4, we did do full performance facial capture,
Hmm.
face and we in the sound, the studio we were working in, the sound wasn't the greatest, so we ended up recording the sound after. But yeah, they did grab facial performance. I asked them because once they got the new character designs for Devil May Cry 4, I was like, "There's some, it's not exactly me, but there's something there." And they said, "Oh yeah, we took your image and we mixed it with David Beckham, and that's who Dante is." And I'm like, "Oh, so you took my image and you didn't even tell me? Thank you." And they're like, "Well, it's not really you." So I'm like, "That's okay. If it looked exactly like me, I wouldn't complain a minute."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Uh, um, but it's nice. It's a hybrid. I don't know if they told David Beckham this. Probably not. But that's what they told me.
Yeah, that's awesome because I noticed like especially during the Devil May Cry 3, like I look at Dante's face and I've seen pictures of you and I'm like they kind of there's some facial features here that look almost like for like, especially during dialogue scenes and stuff like that, which I thought was really cool. So I was kind of curious about that. But for the fact that
Yeah,
you've
I think that was just coincidence for three.
okay, I was kind of curious about that because it just for me like I actually played 3 again last night before this interview to make sure that I was seeing what I saw accurately and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, there's a little bit of lightness there, but I guess that didn't have much to do with actual, taking the facial capture stuff like that. I still think that was pretty cool for them to do on top of that and getting the motions to match up with a lot of the dialogue that you were saying during the cutscenes. I know that can be very hard to do for a lot of developers and stuff like that in the industry. But so, well, my next question here, uh, just how much of the game did you mocap Dante for? Like, was it all through the or for Devil May Cry 3 in this case? Was it all throughout the action scenes? Was it during dialogue scenes? Like, there was the intro to the game that was really over the top. I was kind of curious if you had any involvement over that too.
So we were mostly responsible for the dialogue for the cutscenes.
Hmm.
Um, because of my action background, I did do a fair amount of my own stunts,
Hmm.
but
Uh-oh. We lost the call, ladies and gentlemen. Hold on a second. Let me try to get that back.
hello, hello.
Okay,
Can
hello,
you?
hello.
Okay, I just see we just lost picture.
Yeah, just it should be coming back now.
Okay, but you can hear me fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so we did have a stunt double, a couple actually. So Yuji Shimomura, who is the action director, brought in his team,
Mhm.
and the main stunt double for Dante was Sonomura, who's now become sort of his own an action director in his own right in
Mhm.
Japan. He's a super awesome dude. I was working with him on a project back in January out in Japan, so that was fun. Um, Again, NDAs. I can't tell you which project
Of
it
course,
is.
of course.
I can definitely. I will say this: it was not Devil May Cry. So all the speculators out there were like, "Oh my God, he was in Japan in January." Um, so so he was my stunt double for especially for the opening scene. There was some really crazy stunts in that one that they ended up using him for.
Hmm.
There's actually a whole like behind the scenes thing that was released on the PlayStation. Like it was a code or something. You finish the game or some sort of behind the scenes. Maybe it was a special edition.
Yeah.
Some people have uploaded that to. I think Shimomura actually uploaded it to YouTube.
Oh
So if you
wow.
want to Google that and check it out, you can actually see the stuff that I did and the stuff that stunt doubles stepped in and did some stuff for.
Yeah, I think there was
So
a little bit of that inside the game as well. I think they played it after the credits. They showed a little bit
yeah.
of some of the actual stunts that you guys did on top of that, and I thought that was really cool to see as well.
So yeah, it's a lot was done, and most of the in-game stuff is all hand animated. In
Hmm.
fact, almost all of it. There's a couple taunts and things that I captured for for the in-game things, but um, that's changing now. In-game is becoming more realistic, and they're looking for more motion, especially back in that period of gaming to get the quick actions from the button.
Hmm.
It didn't make sense. Some games did actually have you mocap. We did mocap the in-game stuff,
Right.
but all that motion would be edited and cut down in order for the response time for the when you hit the button for the character to move really quick and
Yeah. Yeah.
human like it's not very natural. But um, but yeah, that's sort of the way they do things. They did things back then, and they still now. A
Yeah.
lot of in-game stuff is animated.
Real quick here, Ruben. Is your camera working over here? 'Cause we have to get the picture back for the camera. I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but on my side, you are definitely not showing it all. There we
There.
go. Okay, cool.
All right, sweet.
All right, awesome. But yeah, I thought that was really cool to see that though. To be able to, you don't really get a chance to see that often in games, and be able to see that at that time with you and some of the other motion cap actors and during those scenes was actually pretty cool to me, and it actually helped me figure out who you were on top of that. And I had to reach out when I got a chance to, which is fantastic.
Now, I've uploaded on my site some behind the scenes of Devil May Cry 4,
Mm.
some of the cutscenes, and it's sort of split screen showing what happened in the motion capture world. And so if you want to check that out too, there's plenty of clips on YouTube where you can sort of see the process.
And what channel is on YouTube?
Was it Ruben Langdon channel? I don't know. Let me see here. No, oh yeah, it's an older channel that I haven't been able to access. Like I
Oh,
uploaded
really?
this before YouTube did so I uploaded a bunch of stuff and then I haven't been able to update it or anything. But yeah, it's Ruben Langdon YouTube channel, and there's a bunch of videos and behind the scenes stuff on there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So be sure to check that out, guys. If you want to see some of the behind the scenes stuff for Devil May Cry 4 as well, which you didn't really put that stuff in the game, to my knowledge, from what I've seen, and I've played that game extensively to that point.
No, they haven't.
Yeah. So be sure to check that out when you get a chance to. But for my next question, you talked a little bit about how you guys rolled for Dante and Devil May Cry 4, but speaking of Capcom, Resident Evil, you talked a little bit about that. So I was kind of curious, how did you end up with the role with Chris for Resident Evil 5, and how you some of the work was for him in Resident Evil 6? How did that come about?
Yeah, so in 5, well, actually, going back way back to Code Veronica, uh, or I was called to an audition. I was part of an action team groups. There's several out there: Japan Action Club, Wild Stunts, Action, which is Kurata Yasuaki, his stunt team.
Mhm.
And I would go and train with all these cats. And there's another one called AAC, and it actually stands for Attractive Action Club. Lame name, but an awesome team. Um, and they were doing sort of back then, they were sort of the main action team doing motion capture
Mhm.
for games and stuff like Tekken and the different cutscenes and things like that. So they called me in to audition and I remember going to the audition. It was Resident Evil,
Mhm.
and I was like, "Sweet, I love this game." Didn't know the details, but they're like, "Yeah, we want you to read for the role of Chris. You're the same height as him in the game, so that's gonna help us out with the and CGI stuff later." I'm like,
Right.
"Okay, sweet." So read for the role, and then they called me and said, "Yeah, you got it." I'm like, "Oh, sweet, okay." Um, and then they just said, like I said earlier, the only thing is we want you to do your lines in English
Mhm.
because that's the final product, but everybody else is going to do their lines in Japanese. I was like, okay, that's odd, but
Yeah, that's a little weird. Yeah.
okay, yeah, sounds like let's give it a shot. So I had two scripts, I had a Japanese script and an English script, and then we would go to rehearsals, and I'd have to teach the Japanese actors what the English word, and hey, this is what I'm going to say. And when I say this word, because they couldn't remember the whole English dialogue.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I would say, when I finish my sentence with this word, that's my cue, that's your cue to pick up and do your dialogue. And it just was this horrible
Oh wow.
mix match, you know, it just didn't. I call it the gunhead effect, and I actually mentioned this in an interview the other day. That old movie, Japanese movie Gunhead. I don't know if you saw it. The
Mhm.
uh, live action film where they hired, I think, a local in Japan. It was like a sci-fi thing. They hired local native English speaking actors and they put them with these Japanese actors, and because they clearly couldn't speak Japanese, and the Japanese people clearly couldn't speak English, they just had everybody speak their native tongue, and they pretended like they knew what each other was saying.
Yeah.
So look up Gunhead if you have time, or any of your audience has time, and
Yeah.
you'll see what I'm talking about. And ever since that experience I had, I just call it the Gunhead effect, and it's just not really the good way to do things, and hence me starting my company and launching these games and really pushing to uh, for these projects to do things in another way. So, anyways, I sort of established myself as Chris Redfield, motion capture guy. Then, uh, in prior renditions, he didn't have a motion capture actor; it was
Mhm.
just hand animated. I think they did Resident Evil Zero or some kind of reboot for the GameCube back in the day.
Yes. Yes.
I think they called somebody else in for the mocap at that time.
Mhm.
I think at that time I'd already moved back to the States, so it was not accessible, and it was casting through a different company. Everything was just different.
Yeah.
And then we sort of circled back around to Capcom like after that game. And since I had that relationship, we started to do. They approached us to do the cutscenes for Resident Evil 5,
Mhm.
and at the time I was also working simultaneously on Avatar.
Oh
So
wow.
I sort of said, I don't know if I'm going to have time in my schedule to do to act as Chris Redfield. So
Yeah.
maybe we should find somebody else. So we actually auditioned and tried to find other people. And at the end of the day, my schedule opened up, and then Capcom was like, "Oh, you know what it was? Actually, I did. We actually picked somebody. We picked somebody to do the mocap for Chris,
Mhm.
the voice as well, and his schedule, he wasn't available when it came
Oh
time we had to do like a test shoot.
yeah.
And then Capcom was like, "You know what, Ruben, you were Chris before. For the test, why don't you just be Chris?" I was like, "Yeah, okay, it's fine." It wasn't my plan, but I was like, "Yeah, I'll jump in the suit and I'll be Chris again. It's fine. I've done it before, and it's just a test."
Right.
So after the test, they're like, you know what, Ruben, why don't you just be Chris for the rest of the game? And I was like, I don't know if my schedule's going to work out. Let me check that. And then I said, I'm honored, but we'll see if this works. So I remember it right at that time, right when we sort of got the schedules all in place and everything happened, Avatar went to New Zealand to
Mm.
do all the live action stuff.
Yeah.
And they kind of said, we'd love to have you, but it's not essential, you know. They kind of gave me a place that I could bow out for that
Right.
time. They're like, no, we're going down to New Zealand. Do you want to come?
Right.
I'm like, well, I've got this other gig. You know, I probably should stay and do that. Like, oh, no problem. We'll see you in a year, basically 9 months. They were down there.
Right.
So, okay. So during that time, I got to reprise my role as Chris, and it worked out perfectly. Because right when I finished that, Avatar was back, and they said, "Hey, Ruben, can you come? Got more mocap to do on Avatar."
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how it all worked out. And then six, it was like a no-brainer. They were like, "Yep." Luckily, it was a different team that didn't make the audition for the role again. They're like, "Yeah, Ruben, you're Chris for six." Okay. so it's just been an ongoing thing.
Yeah, that's all.
It's been
That's
pretty
really
cool.
cool. That's really cool. And I was kind of curious. Me and a good friend of mine were kind of curious because we both played through that game from start to finish. There's an infamous scene towards the end amongst the community. Resident Evil
Boulder
fans. The
punching.
boulder punch. Yes, the boulder punching scene. Yes. How
That
did
was
that
not
come
me.
about?
I
Okay.
I cannot take credit for that. That was so there's a few cutscenes in that game, including the boulder punching, that
Yeah.
actually they did in Japan.
Mhm.
With I think they just used maybe some of the animators out of the studio there because Capcom has their own mocap studio
Mhm.
in Osaka, a smaller one, but they use it to sort of suit up and do various moves for in-game things and whatnot. And when they get an idea at the last minute and they need to execute it,
Yeah.
which the bolt punching was, because that was not in the script anywhere.
Okay.
Uh, then they throw on the suit and then they do the thing. So I was blown away, when I saw that
Yeah.
in the voiceover studio. I'm like, where did this come from? This is great. Um, and what else? And so whenever I remember, so here's clearly Resident Evil 6. I think it's pretty through. It's me. They didn't do any weird stuff in that one.
Hmm.
But in 5, whenever Chris is holding the gun like this,
Yeah.
this is a Japanese performer, and whenever he's holding the gun like this is me.
Oh, okay.
That's how you can determine because we had a long talk with Capcom. We're like, you know what? This is like nobody really holds their guns like this. This is like old 80s police shows,
Right. Right.
and they had already sort of pre-captured a bunch of stuff, like with some other test stuff that they done with Japanese actors with holding a gun like this,
Mhm.
and we sort of convinced them. We said, that's tactically that's very inaccurate. If you're looking for more realism and you want to put stuff in your games, only if you're an 80s police officer are you going to hold your gun like that. So that's a good sort of way to tell what scenes did I capture
Mhm.
and what scenes they did in Japan.
That's
Besides the boulders.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was one of the highlight scenes of that game right there. A lot, well talked about scene on top of that.
I am so disappointed that they didn't call it boulders. Because yes, I've had to answer this question several times, and I've
Yeah.
had to sort of say no. Unfortunately, it's not me. Because I
No.
would have loved to punch some boulders.
Because we were kind of curious. I'm like, did he? Because they said he did the motion capture for Chris. Would he do that one scene that everyone's talking about constantly? So
Unfortunately, no, I
yeah,
can't take credit for that.
that's unfortunate. But still, besides that, that's still really cool. And now I know what to look for when I see him holding the gun in different positions and stuff
Yep.
like that. Know who that is. That's really cool. So while we're on the Capcom topic, and you talked a little bit about Street Fighter Five, for people that don't know, you're the voice of Ken Masters.
Yep.
Um, that game actually had a really big story update recently with a lot of dialogue between the characters and stuff like that. Yeah. So, how, what sort of state did that come about during in the development for you? Because I know you did some of the voiceover for, the Ken's moves and stuff like that, where the Shoryuken and the kicks and stuff like that. But did that come up again at some point later on after the game came out, where you had to come back and do that, or was that a thing that was going
No, no,
ongoing?
that we we recorded that a year ago,
Hmm.
over a year ago. So before the game was even announced, that was in the planning phase. That was um, I remember, yeah, last year, E3 last year. So yeah, over a year ago, I went in and recorded that. They didn't have any animation. They didn't have any temp
Oh
animation.
wow.
Uh, all they had was the pre-recorded Japanese voices,
Hmm.
and we had to match the length of the voices. So whatever dialogue that they came up with, we had to find English dialogue that would fit, and we have to say our lines all within that same line, that same timing of the Japanese line.
Right.
So it was a little tough. It's nice to have something to match to, so you can sort of gauge where what the story is, and you could tell on paper what the story is, but just to really match it up and give the cadence the way it should be. And
Right.
I always prefer to do things um, after the fact. However, the animators then like to do things before the fact, Disney style, doing the voices first, and then they sort of can animate to the voices.
Right.
So there's a lot of different approaches and ways to do things. But traditionally, in doing dubbing anime and dubbing games, you're usually doing it after the fact. So that's just what I'm used to.
Right.
Where this time it was just go in and read your lines, and they're going to do it all later in post. So. Uh, so yeah, it was a little different style and difficult in
Mhm.
that sense. And I know the English version so Capcom didn't really spend the time to animate the lip flaps for the English. They
Right.
did it more for the Japanese. So you have again sort of kung fu movie thing going on, which is a shame. I know Metal Gear they actually animated for both. The Japanese version
Mm.
has one set of lip flaps, and the English version has another set.
Yeah.
So that's cool, and they had the budget to do that. But I don't think the Street Fighter guys didn't have the budget, so they just we just had to match the length, and they tried the best but yeah, no, I haven't played it. I haven't played the storyboard mode yet. I've been so busy on my other projects,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but I've seen some stuff on YouTube, and it looks cool. I'm excited. I'm glad they did it, and it looks like it came out pretty sweet.
Yeah,
So
from what I've seen, it looks like it's pretty well done. And you didn't do any motion capture for that at all, right? That was something
no,
else
no,
entirely.
that was all. I think that's all hand animated. You
Okay,
know, Street Fighter from the get go has always been all hand animated. They've never had any mocap stuff.
right. That's really awesome though. And that was the thing you talked about where the leak came out about whether or not the character was you and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that was like early on. That was like I think over the summer last year, and I was just like, oh god. And people were like, "Hey, is Ruben? Is that you?" And I'm like, maybe. I don't know. Could be.
jeez. That's the thing that where it just you if people know it's you, just it should be able to come out and
Just
say
yeah,
that.
just say yeah, it's me.
Yeah, you should be able to
Cool.
do that.
Yeah.
And I think it's cool that, or interesting that you mentioned the whole thing about trying to match, your dialogue to the movement with Japanese and stuff like that. Because I recall David Hayter, who we interviewed a while back, talking about something like that for the first Metal Gear, where they had to match up their dialogue to the
Yeah.
characters' movements and stuff like that before the timing and stuff like that matched up as well. And I guess that does explain a lot of some of the discrepancies that happen in some dialogue scenes from Japanese games that are translated to English. And how some of it comes off as a little stilted and weird and stuff like that in some cases. But I think it's really cool that you mentioned that
Well,
because that does explain some of that.
yeah. And sort of, I pride myself in Resident Evil 6 because for Resident Evil 5, we didn't have the opportunity to animate, our team
Mm,
didn't have the opportunity to animate the lip flaps.
yeah,
And it was done by Japanese. Same with Metal Gear, done by Japanese animators,
mm,
non-native English speaking animators. And what happens is they just don't have the understanding of the movements of the English dialogue.
mm,
And the way they hear things and see things is different because
right,
they're not native speakers, they don't get it. Um, Not saying they're bad animators. They just shoot. If I was an seasoned animator and I had to animate Japanese lip flaps, I'd have the same issue.
yeah, yeah,
So for Resident Evil 6, the team and I worked extensively. Even though we had most of our team were Japanese speakers, we had an English animation supervisor, Paul Alvarez, who went through and talked to every animator and said, no, we got to change this, we got to do that. I was making notes like crazy. So if you look at the lip flaps in Resident Evil 6, compared to all the rest,
Mhm.
compared to Street Fighter, compared to Metal Gear, compared to Resident Evil 5, or all of the other Japanese games out there. They're pretty spot on. We've had, not 100%. We had some scheduling conflicts that we had to push things out
Right.
faster than we would have wanted to. But take a look and let me know what you think about those lip flaps.
I'm gonna have to take a look at that now. I played through it the first time, but I didn't really pay attention to it that much. But now that you mentioned that,
Sure.
I'm gonna have to take a good look at that and
If
see.
you play 5 and you go play 6, you're going to see a major discrepancy in the lip flaps. The issue and the qualities. 6 is way better.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. Talk. This has given me whole different perspectives on things to look for in the games now when I go back to play them. I think that's really cool. So,
Yeah.
lastly, for my last question, you know there was some work that was done on The Last of Us that you did. I was kind of curious about what exactly, if you could talk about that, what work you actually did on that game.
Yeah. Yeah, the game's out, so I can talk about it.
Sure, sure.
Um, yeah, so I was sort of hired in the beginning during the first trailer. I was recommended. I came in and did some work on uh, just as sort of the stunt coordinator
Mhm.
to choreograph some of the fights, to make sure everything was safe, and then to step in for Joel, for Troy Baker, to do some of the more heavy stunt stuff.
Right.
So though Troy did a lot of the stuff himself,
Mhm.
and then we sort of helped him out. But whenever it came to like some of the heavier falls or bigger zombie punches or something like that, then I stepped in and did that. So then that sort of carried its way through. They liked what I did during the trailer, and then during the entire production, I kept getting called back. And hey, Ruben, can you come in for this cut scene? And oh, since you're here, can you play this character? And oh, uh, can you do this fall? And it was just sort of, I guess I don't know if I didn't see the credits. I don't know if they gave me a stunt coordinator credit or not, but
I'll have to
that
double
was
check
sort
on that, but I think they did.
probably that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was sort of stunt coordinator slash, uh, you know, anytime there was a major fall or character getting killed or something like that, then that was me. I played a lot of the characters in the cutscenes. Um, they actually kept my voice for two,
Mhm.
um, two that I know of, maybe more. But I think I remember them saying, the Naughty Dog guys saying, "Yeah, I got the record for playing the most characters in that game." Joel or Troy also played a lot of characters.
Mhm.
He not only they would have, because it's mocap. They were like, "Hey, Troy, can you play this character?" And
Right.
hey, Nolan came in to play a character, and then they're like, "Hey, Nolan, can you be this other guy at the same time?" And so in mocap land, we're always doubling up on characters
Yeah.
and doing different things. But yeah, I was pretty stoked when they're like, "Yeah, I'm playing more characters than anybody else." Though most of my characters just came in and got shot or killed, and or had like one line, and that was it. But I have the record for the most number of characters performed in
Like,
that
hey,
game.
somebody's got to come in and do it at some point, right?
Exactly. No, and the guys are so Neil and that team. We got together again for Uncharted 4,
Mhm.
and it's such a good team to work with. They're always pushing for uh, just for perfection, absolute the best.
Mhm.
When best combination of movement, dialogue, storytelling, the situations, everything is just so well thought out,
Yeah.
and and the team really wants everything just to work well. And then a lot of times we'll do something, they get it back in the studio, they'll try to fit it together. It's not working. We'll come back and we'll do another session. And they're like, "Hey, yeah, tweak this. It didn't work here." And just the amount of time and effort that the Naughty Dog team goes into putting into their product really shows for
Oh
me
yeah.
when you're playing the game, um, and just as a performer too, because you get into it more, uh, and and the direction that Neil gives me as a performer as well as the team, he's got all of this background to go with it. And it's
Right.
like, this is, this is your character, this is where he comes from. I don't think he would do that. And a lot of just thought goes into it,
Mhm.
very much like a big budget film approach,
Right. Right.
where, you know, where I think in some other games and other productions, a lot gets sort of missed over. When you
Yeah.
don't put the time and effort into thinking about it, then the character flaws, I say character flaws, I say like, discrepancies in a character doing something that he probably wouldn't have done,
Right.
but it just is looked over. It's not really thought out as much.
Yeah.
And part of that is the actor's responsibility. Most of it is the writer's responsibility.
Right. Right. That's true.
And a lot of the game developers haven't until now started looking at those aspects.
Mm-hmm.
And Last of Us really showed, Uncharted as well, but The Last of Us showed the game industry and other game developers how important story is,
Right.
and the writing of story, and how it can really make your game. It's everybody says gameplay, gameplay, gameplay. Yes, that's equally as important. You cannot deny the gameplay,
Right.
but you also cannot deny the story. You cannot
true.
deny the action. You cannot deny it. You have to put your attention on all of it, and that's the balance. I think Naughty Dog has really found the game experience, and they put the attention in all the aspects that really needs to happen for the gamer to have that full immersive experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it definitely shows in more ways than one, because both of those games, Uncharted 4 and The Last of Us, turned out to be two of my favorite games of all time because of that. And I think that like you said yourself, a lot
There's
of
an emotional Yeah, when there's an emotional connection to the characters you're playing, and this goes same with the film industry and the film world, when you can connect on an emotional level to these characters, then that's full immersion.
Yeah.
Full immersion is not a technology. Full immersion is an emotional connection that you get with characters, with your experience. It's about emotion. It's not about the visual experience. You can go see an explosion on, Transformers or all this stuff, right? Destruction, Superman blowing up the city. We see that every day now.
Right.
The audience has become numb to the number of big explosions, crazy stuff happening, Independence Day nonsense.
Yeah.
It's if anything, should be a textbook case study on how to make a good product. Is you get your user to have an emotional connection, and when you do that, and this is where I am sort of an advocate, and I talk about violence in games, and is it a good thing or bad thing? I personally think if you create an emotional connection with your characters and in your story, whatever you do in that game, it's going to be something positive, whether it's super violent or whatever, because now you're actually you're empathizing with the characters on screen,
Right.
and you get to feel that, shoot, if I kill this guy right now, that's going to suck.
Yeah.
I'm going to feel bad. It makes me feel funny and weird.
Yeah.
And bad, and I don't like that. And yes, there's psychopaths out there that may get off on that stuff, but it sort of teaches us it's a responsible way of dealing with things. Where I think, yes, there's way too much violence in video games and movies. It's just goofiness. It's just blah. And then it doesn't teach you any values. There's a complete disconnect. If anything, it teaches you to disconnect from reality even more.
Yeah.
So, sorry to go off of my philosophy.
No, it's totally fine. No, there's no worries at all.
But I respect, and I enjoyed working on Last of Us, even though it was a very violent sort of hard piece to sit through for a lot of people. But to me, that's a good thing. to me, that emotional content that it created lets you know that, hey, violence sucks,
Yeah,
and there's sort of consequences to your actions.
exactly.
Where these other games you play, there's no consequences, there's no emotional connection, so it's
Right.
like, oh yeah, whatever, you know, I'll continue, I'll die, I'll kill a million people, and it won't matter, and there's no consequences.
Yeah. And there's no emotional connection whatsoever to doing it, you know?
It's button mashing, explosion, eye candy goofiness.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, which which are fun. Hey, I'm not denying any of that. Stuff is awesome. But I just feel we've been there, we've done that as a society. We've seen so much, craziness. Let's start developing games with emotional connections, emotional content.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely agree with that. And it definitely pays off in spades when you see things like that in games. And I think you made a great point about
Yeah,
that.
Last of Us is number one rated game of
Yeah.
all time, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like during that year, it got so many awards. It was ridiculous for that. But it earned that based on, the love and attention they put into the game.
So other developers take notes.
You guys watching this? Capcom? Hey,
Yeah.
there you go.
Hey, take some notes.
All
Take
right.
some notes. Emotional
So
content.
So I guess to kind of bring this thing to a close, what's next for you? What are you currently working on at the moment, or anything that you want to let your fans know about going forward?
This is always the tough one because most of the stuff that the fans want to hear, I can't talk about it because NDAs, as we were saying earlier in the conversation, NDAs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But no, the stuff I can talk about. So I'm working on some documentaries in the sort of the paranormal phenomena, UFO world. If you see any of my posts on Facebook, I'm sort of an advocate um, for disclosure. It's called.
Hmm.
It's, disclosing to the human race about an extraterrestrial presence or some sort of extra dimensional higher intelligence. That there's some sort of higher intelligence engaging the human race as we speak right now.
Hmm.
And there's lots of evidence that supports this. And all we need is the mainstream, as well as us people. The mainstream media and those folks won't touch it for a number of reasons. But a lot of people are sort of doing their own investigations and coming to the realization that there's an overwhelming amount of evidence
Yeah.
that the human race is being engaged in some sort of fashion. And I love exploring that. I love exploring sort of the unexplored.
Right.
Talking about consciousness and developing new technologies and new ways of doing things, new in the political space. I'm sort of been following a lot of social and cultural sort of new ideas, things, ways. I'm a big advocate for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and sort of a new monetary system that gets us away from the big banks and big corporations and corporations in government. I'm sort of an advocate for getting all of that craziness out and letting the individual have their own freedoms and and expansive minds and getting out of this sort of being told what to do and this is the way it is and drink this product and let everybody become sort of their own free thinkers and empower themselves. And that's
Yeah.
sort of a lot of the messages and documentary stuff that I'm working on is sort of in that space. I feel there's been a major sort of suppression of exploration of these ideas, not in the sense that no, you can't explore that, but just in our general day-to-day lives, we sort of are not motivated and not pushed to explore these ideas. We're sort of sedated in a way to just go along with the status quo.
Right. Right.
And so I'm very vocal and exploring these ideas and trying to see what else is out there in our universe and in our innerverse.
That's actually really cool to hear all that. And then considering that, a lot of my family are really in tune to these type of subjects as well, I think it's really cool to hear things like that and to hear that you're actually working on this as well. I would totally be into seeing these documentaries that you might be working on and stuff like that. So that's actually really cool. But Ruben, do you have any time left over for a couple of community questions here? I only have a handful.
Yeah, yeah. If it's just a couple, sure.
Okay, so
let me take a little swig of my smoothie here. I didn't get this finished before breakfast. But go ahead and ask the question. I'm listening.
Okay, sure. All right, so this question comes from at Vancy on Twitter. Vancy, I know you're watching this. Hi, Vancy. She says, what was the craziest and most memorable stunt that you did for a video game?
The craziest and most memorable stunt. Video game. Oh, I don't know. I don't know, actually. That's a hard one because we're, in the video game world, we're in this motion capture. They call the motion capture volume, and it's a pretty contained room with limited ceiling space. Mm-hmm. So you can only go so high. We use stunt mats for the big stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes you miss a mat, no big deal. But it's not like, when you go outside on a movie and let's say you're hanging from a wire, 70 feet in the air and you're flying through buildings. That's sort of memorable because it's real, it's live. And in the video game space, we have these little rooms that we're sort of mimicking all these movements. Mm-hmm. And we use wire work and we do kind of crazy fun things all the time, but it's not, when you compare it to a live action set, it's not that grandiose. Right. It's very subdued and safe. And that's one of the reasons why I've had such a long stunt career in the motion capture business for 20 years. Is because you look at these other stuntmen that are doing this crazy stuff, mm-hmm. they're not healthy. I mean, they're healthy, but yeah. A lot of injuries happen, over the years, and I've had my share of injuries, trust me. But like some major stuff, and it definitely have a longer lasting career, sticking, I guess, the way I've been doing. Getting lit on fire, I would never do that. Virtual fire all day, all day. I do, zombies on fire in the volume anytime.
Yeah.
So I guess to answer that question, a lot of the stuff I've done in the mocap space, it's sort of, a lot of it repeats itself. Mm-hmm. And even though some of it on screen is, for example, Uncharted 4, there's a scene, I forget the character's name, the gal, she comes in and, is it Monique? Is her name Monique?
Was it Nadine?
I forget her name. Who's this? Nadine.
Yeah,
sorry,
Nadine.
Okay. So she comes in and she has like a scuffle with Drake, yes, right? So I was Drake, and we had a stunt girl come in, and Amy Johnson come in and double her for that scene. And we have our little thing, and then they say, okay, you're gonna go rolling out, and you're gonna fall through the window, right? Yeah. And you're gonna go. So I saw that, I'm like, holy smokes, that's epic. That's an epic. We just fell into pads like, this high. It was not, it wasn't, the fight stuff we did, bam, 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 she punches me in the face, kicks me, elbows me, hit my head on the side of the thing and whatever. And then we go into this, the ceiling falls. But this epic sort of fall that we mocapped was just, I jumped from a box into a mat. It was like a 3-second fall. But you see it in the game, and it's this epic, crazy 3-story fall, right?
Right.
So, a lot of this stuff comes out on once the animators get their hands on it, and they make it grandiose and epic. Yeah. But in the studio, it's falling into a mat that's only like this high. Same with the Uncharted 3. The when he's falling out of the aircraft carrier, the aircraft thing, and I'm hanging on the net. That's me. I was just like hanging on to poles, and I was on a wire, and they're like pulling me, and I'm like, but and then then you let go, and then you like fall, right? But the wire is actually keeping me up, so I didn't actually have to fall. We did a separate shot where I'm just like, you know, and I fall into a nice porta pit, a big mat. So even though, and that's why I love motion capture because you can cheat everything, and you know, get the fall in the pads. So I'm sorry, but I guess there isn't any like big grandiose moments other than the ones I sort of spoke about.
Right.
But in the motion capture stage, it didn't look grand at all. It was quite, you'd laugh, you're like, oh, that's all he did. So that's why we need animators, and animators are so important. And yes, performers are important, but the animators are just as important to make us performers look badass.
Yeah, that whole thing kind of blew my mind for a second because I had no idea that you did that scene with Nadine with the throwing out the window and the
Right.
flying out of the aircraft carrier thing as well, and learning about the inside story behind that. Also, just had no idea. That's awesome. I think that's really awesome, and I'm sure that I'm pretty sure she'll be satisfied with the answer to that question, regardless, knowing her, as she's a friend of mine, of course.
Touch. Okay, great.
So the next question comes from next DMC panel / convention is going to be because she's heartbroken that she missed the last one.
So you cut out there for a second. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. The question is from Tiana Scott on YouTube.
Yep.
She says, "Do you know when the next DMC panel / convention is going to be? Because she was heartbroken that she missed the last one."
Oh, okay. Well, my next convention appearance is at the end of the month at AFO in it's Anime Festival Orlando in Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
It's one I frequent every year. I try to. There's been a couple of years where I missed it, but I'm sure check with them. I'm sure there's going to be some sort of panel there. I usually do at conventions. I usually do a Devil May Cry panel. So yeah. If not, come track me down in the hallway and I'll give you a mini panel. If you make that info.
All right, there you go. You heard him. All right, for the last question here, and this one comes from multiple users, and it's it's the obvious one that people aren't going to ask in this case, but I'm going to ask this for the case of them not saying that I didn't try to ask.
I can already say, oh no.
Don't know, exactly. So Devil May Cry, guys. Devil May Cry 5, he doesn't know.
Don't know.
He doesn't.
I can't. I you know, and I've been saying this for a long time, is you would think that, especially and of late, you know, what was it, the Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition that came out, and the numbers, you know, I know it did well for Capcom, and about when it came out, I remember seeing some an interview with Itsuno. Itsuno-san, the director of the game, director of Devil May Cry 3 and 4, he said something in an interview about a Devil May Cry 5.
Yeah.
Now, since then, I haven't heard anything. I haven't seen anything. And I'm kind of in the same space as you guys. And I'm just like, yeah, what's it going to happen? Come on. I need a job. I still got it in me, too. I still would love to reprise that role of Dante and do that. So, like you guys, I am waiting as well.
All right, there you go. Capcom, are you watching? Let's make that happen. He's still down for totally doing the role once again. So Devil May Cry 5, let's get that out there. But I think that about wraps it up for my community questions and the questions in general. So to bring this thing to a close, Ruben, thank you so much for joining me on this show today. I know there was a couple technical issues, and I do apologize to the folks at home that had to endure that as well. Skype has been really weird as of late when it comes to stuff like this. So I'll try to get as much as I can of this posted and recorded up to YouTube as soon as possible for those that happen to miss it. But yeah, do apologize for those issues. Try to bear with us on this one. But thanks again, Ruben, for joining me. Much appreciated. Hopefully, sometime in the future, if you have time, would you totally be okay with coming back on the show to talk about more stuff that you worked on? Or?
Absolutely.
Oh, definitely appreciate
that.
I just appreciate that. But all right. Thank you so much once again, and we'll see you next time, Ruben. You take care.
All right. Later.